Hi, I'm making a very quick video today. You're not going to see my face. About my old YouTube channels, Mauritian Struggle and Renaissance Man. So, the context for the title, the Retractions that I'll be talking about, this is because I read a sermon by St. Alphonsus Liguori, or a homily, or whatever you want to call it, where he points out that you actually need to make proper reparation for your errors in the past in giving advice and things like this. And so this probably will be the first of many. It could be the first of many. But I'm going to deal in broad strokes with some of the errors that I held on these previous channels and give them some sort of correction. I know that some of you have followed me, and this has been a sort of a journey of me travelling from an atheist through to a Roman Catholic. But that nonetheless doesn't mean that I shouldn't repudiate my errors in the past. People will watch the videos on those channels and probably fall into errors, maybe. And so I thought that I'd correct them in broad strokes. If people would like to watch other content about other stuff, I'll consider doing other ones. I might do other ones anyway. So I thought that the biggest one that I should probably correct, probably the most dangerous one actually, is not actually the philosophical positions that I held. Because, 1 in 100 people actually listen to the lectures at a university, the other 99 are dragged into sin. And that was my attitude towards the manosphere, to PUA content and stuff like that. I should never have associated with that sort of thing, because it was truly a waste of time. Dealing with PUA content, this desire for relationships that's inordinate, particularly in the context of things like having sex outside of marriage, plate spinning, things like this, it was a waste of time, and I talked too much with that side of the internet. Now, in terms of what I actually said, I tried to point it in such a way that led to good Christian marriages. I don't think that such a thing is possible anymore, because I believe that the techniques that are taught by the PUAs that I've seen are intended towards the kind of woman who isn't sorted for that kind of thing, isn't suited. She is somebody who is more open to fornication. This is one problem. Another problem is that if you're successful, then that will stir up pride and it will darken you further and draw you further from God. So I must disavow PUA techniques like this. The third thing is that I must disavow, well, I really disavow MGTOW anyway, but I disavow any of that sort of thing with the exception of maybe the equal rights of men, and even then actually I don't think that's quite right, because men and women are fundamentally different, and so they should have different responsibilities and therefore have different rights that reflect their nature. So that would be a very brief overview of the PUA stuff. So I'm sure people are thinking now, well, what would be your alternative? Because this is the thing. In the modern age, you have many people like Rollo Tomassi or Gonzalo Lira talking about PUA techniques or talking about metagame or things like this. But how do you actually approach this in a way that is good? Not in the way that pleases other human beings, but in a way that is actually good for you and not good for your appetites necessarily. And the solution to this is to realize that a lot of what PUA techniques are doing is mimicking virtue. So it is mimicking the good acts that are taught by the saints and taught by the doctors of the church in such a way that it attracts people, because people are naturally attracted to virtue. It also plays on some of the insecurities and the psychological weaknesses of women in order to manipulate them into relationships. Let's be honest here, that's exactly what it is to a large extent as well. And so the solution is rather to follow the virtues as the saints taught them. It really is just that simple. Rather than accepting the fake liminality of wearing a different garment to make yourself stand out at the nightclub, or even going into the nightclub in the first place, you shouldn't be there. Rather than getting yourself flaming drunk so that you're not afraid of a woman, rather than having multiple women on the go at once so you appear more confident, what you should actually be is just more confident. And the way that you do that is by dispersing sin, by dispersing the world, and by living a life that isn't dependent on other people. If you have no attachment to these people, if you have no attachment to women, then how can they possibly intimidate you? Now, many of you MGTOW types who I'm sure are watching this, you're addicted to pornography, most of you. right? You have an inherent repeated addiction that makes you ultimately enslaved to carnal pleasure. Because let's make no mistake, this PUA stuff is often that. It's simply a living out of carnality, or worse, it's a living out of pride. And so the response is chastity, which is the proper ordered use of the sexual faculty, which is basically not to use it at all, including in thoughts and including in touch outside of marriage. And within marriage, to keep it with your partner in such a way that serves both of your goods, not your pleasure, or serves the reproduction of children. These things are necessary in order to live a good life. If you want to think that you can find in some woman eternal life, this eternal craving that you have for human intimacy, or this eternal craving you have for carnal pleasure, you're just wrong. This will lead you into hell. It is a waste of time, and I'm repudiating it now. And those people who are involved in it should turn their back on it, because it's not making them happy. It may be making them money, but they're not happy, and they know it. The second one as well is my example of constantly swearing and insulting people just for fun. I actually used to have this thing where I chose Catholicism because, being true, I could always beat people in debates. This was a really stupid approach, and it was a sign of my own immaturity. There's no particular reason to win in debates aside from in order to win people over to the correct side, which is Roman Catholicism. And likewise, to swear constantly and to insult people tarnished Christ's name and also darkened my own soul. For insults, when they proceed from a bad place, when they proceed from a place of not correcting someone, but rather you just want to mock somebody, these are sinful. For the sake of an act, they are venial. For the sake of something particular about a person, like mocking somebody for being disabled, that's mortal sin. You can read St. Thomas for that. Bad. It is bad. The third one, reaching further into more philosophical range, was the fact that I, for a while, considered myself a philosophical fascist. I didn't say it outright. I didn't want to be in trouble with people, but I was. I went and read the work of Giovanni Gentile and of Benito Mussolini, and I found it convincing. I thought that this idea of having the spirit of a nation and having people participate in that, and that being the democracy, that was good enough. But this isn't true. This is a part of a Hegelianism, and it actually defies the teaching of the Church. You can see this in the Catholic social teaching encyclicals, where they'll talk of something called the principle of subsidiarity, where each particular person takes care of their own level and only reaches into higher levels when it's necessary. Fascism turns this on its head. It's totalitarian. It has the state manage everything. Or it has guilds to manage everything. This sort of top-down approach is contrary to Catholic teaching, and yet I held it. And the final one I'd like to deal with today would be deism. This idea that there's a clockwork God who's in the background and sustains things without actually being present in them. That was my view for about a year before I became, classical theist, and then very, very shortly afterwards a Roman Catholic, looking into orthodoxy. So the problem with this is that if something is granting being, there's never going to not be a link. Not only is this contrary to biblical teaching, for it says in the Epistle to the Hebrews, chapter 1, verse 3, that Christ upholdeth all things, but also it's contrary to common sense, because if you've got the link of being there, then the being can be retracted at any moment. Therefore, that means that God is active in the world. So you can't have a clockwork God, really. That will be the first recording. I'm probably not going to edit this at all. I might edit it a little bit. But yeah, if you have any other ideas about things I should repudiate from my previous channels, if you've watched them, please do send them in. Thank you for watching.